Hello, what about you? You're very welcome. And as always, my thanks to my Patreon friends who are still there. And now, so the Absent Intelligence Tour continues apace. And that's why the voice is still going to be a bit croaky. That's just nothing I can do about that. Because I never went to acting school. I never learned how to project my voice in a proper fashion. So usually by this stage of the tour, halfway through, it's in tatters. And I'm just too old. I don't know what I'm going to do about that. That's just the way it is. I have a tendency to shout a lot on stage. I don't know why that is. There's a microphone there. Don't ask me. It's the demagogue in me wants to come out. So it's going well. And we're halfway through now. But on Wednesday, just past, I got a message from Terry McHugh, my wingman. And he was asking me what time we were starting in Downpatrick the coming Friday. There's Friday past. I answered him, asking if he was off his meds, as I was certain we only had one show this week in Armagh. Now, on double checking, I discovered he was right, which means if he hadn't contacted me, I'd have been sitting at home with a cup of tea as a full house was sitting in the theatre in Downpatrick. Waiting for me to arrive. This only proves what I've known for many years, namely that Mr. McHugh isn't just my opener, but he's now my unpaid carer. Now, the show in Patrick was great. My thanks to all who came. And Armagh, just Saturday night there, was a joy to play. Now, this coming week, we're back in Armagh on the 24th. Tickets are available there. We're in the Ulster Hall on the 25th. It's not as many tickets available there. They're almost all gone. Now, the beauty about stand-up is you get really interesting interactions with the audience. And I don't do that much of it. I do a wee bit at the start, but not too much. So I was walking along the stage and I noticed Stevie and Donna sitting in the front. And now remember, this is Armagh, right? So you wouldn't be expecting people from West Belfast to be at Armagh. But after a very short chat with Donna, I recognised her as having a West Belfast accent. And I've always argued this. The Westies have your own accent. It's a very unique accent. And the fact that I was able to correctly identify Donna as coming from West Belfast proves my point once and for all. Now, here's what happened. Okay, I'm going to play what happened. But this carries a strong language warning. Okay, this is live stand-up. So if you happen to be a sensitive wee soul, this isn't for you. Just flick on to whatever's coming next. Good evening, Armagh. How are we doing? Are we all right? Nice sweet faces in the front row. Shouldn't have got tickets in the front row. That way to get tickets in the front row. What's your name, son? Stevie. Oh, Stevie. Oh, Jake. You the DLA, Stevie? I can see up there, crutcher, Stevie. Yeah, crutcher. You're afraid somebody's going to spot you, Stevie. You crafty here. Watch that fucker, I guarantee, right? See when he come in, I bet you the crutch in the right hand. See when he goes out? I bet he forgets the crutch altogether. See after that.
Take the fucking crutch. Will you take the crutch? Is that who's cleaning that?
You're very welcome, Stevie. And who's the beautiful lady with you? Joanne? Donna! Fucking Donna! Kentucky! Still part of West Belfast you do from. You're on the time. Do you see how I was able to work out it?
Donna! It's unreasonable, Donna!
I always tell Westies have a unique accent. Westies talk, it's... Be careful because this big fucking nanny is in. You notice what Westies have a totally different accent from the rest of Belfast. Because they're really enclosed, aren't they really? Like any town, you'll recognise some stuff I talk about later on. It's a totally different place, West Belfast, so they've developed their own accent. And they have a tendency to accentuate words what do not need to be accentuated. This is the next time Jerry's on fucking news. I was never. At last, some good news for the beleaguered citizens of Gaza, with a ceasefire which is started just today, Sunday. And This is sadly exactly the same deal which was on the table months ago, but was rejected by Benjamin Netanyahu, leading to the needless slaughter of more innocent men, women and children in Gaza. Now, while bumbling Joe Biden has attempted to claim ownership of the deal, the reality is the upcoming inauguration of Donald Trump focused minds of both the IDF and Hamas. The homicidal attack by Hamas on October the 7th, 2023, led to 1,200 Israeli deaths, with another 251 being taken hostage. This was the act of a maniacal organization who had no concern for their own population. Hamas were willing to sacrifice their people on the altar of their political ambitions, and that will be a scar on them forever. Now, of course, the response by Israel was utterly predictable, and Hamas must have knew that. And it resulted in a 15-month war and the deaths of 46,900 Gazans, with another 100,000 injured. And on top of that, there was the displacement of 2.3 million people and the utter destruction of northern Gaza, leading to severe shortages in food, fuel, medicine and shelter, with the IDF refusing to allow aid to that starving population. Now, while the IDF could rely on both the USA and UK for support and armaments, the majority of other nations called the Israeli attack for what it was: genocide. The IDF not only blocked all reporting from within Gaza during the conflict, but killed at least 217 journalists who braved their blockade. So the sickening reality of what the IDF inflicted on the Gazan population will only now begin to be known as the IDF retreat and journalists are allowed back in. The reporting by Western media has been anything but impartial. The language used weighted in favour of Israel. Now here's one simple example, and it's the use of the word hostages for Israelis held by Hamas, but prisoners for those Palestinians held by Israel. This gives the impression that one form of incarceration is illegal, whilst the other legal. The truth, however, is that of the 10,000 Palestinians held by Israel, few have ever seen the inside of a courtroom, with widespread reports of torture and abuse in Israeli prisons. Worse is the fact the Israeli prison service themselves admitted in only June 2024 to holding 226 Palestinian children, most incarcerated without charge and kept in adult prisons. It has also been independently verified by the BBC that the supposed humanitarian zone set up by the IDF was bombed by that same army almost 100 times since May. Another verifiable fact is that 70% of the 46,900 Gazan fatalities were innocent women, men, and children. 40% of that number being children. The youngest victim was a one-day-old boy, and the oldest was a man of something like 97 years. Now, with over 46,000 killed in just 467 days, that's a daily rate of 100 killings a day. And even with the ceasefire announced, Benjamin Netanyahu's bloodlust continued, with attacks in the days leading up to the ceasefire, resulting in over 100 more civilians murdered. It's not just me, people. It's not just the Arab world. It's those with any degree of humanity who have called out this genocidal war. So I'll leave you with part of a report from Mr. Volker Turk, the United Nations Commissioner for Human Rights, on the reality of what has happened in Gaza. You can find the full report at this link if you fancy to listen to the whole thing.
I now give the floor to Mr. Volker Turk.
Mr. President, Excellencies, a human rights catastrophe continues to unfold in Gaza before the eyes of the world. Israel's means and methods of warfare have killed tens of thousands of people, inflicted vast displacement, and laid waste to the territory. This has raised utmost concerns about compliance with international law. A recent report by my office covering the period between 7 October 2023 and 30 June 2024 documents patterns of attacks on hospitals, starting with Israeli airstrikes, followed by raids by ground troops, the detention of some patients and staff, the forced removal of others, and the withdrawal of troops, leaving the hospital essentially non-functional. The report also details the killings of patients, staff, and other civilians. Hamas and other armed groups continue to launch sporadic and indiscriminate attacks on Israel and reportedly to expose civilians and civilian infrastructure, including health facilities, to attack by operating amongst them, which is totally unacceptable. The protection of hospitals during warfare is paramount and must be respected by all sides at all times. The destruction of hospitals across Gaza goes beyond depriving Palestinians of their right to access adequate health care. Those hospitals provided sanctuary for thousands of people with nowhere else to go. The destruction wrought by the Israeli military's attacks last Friday on Kamal Adwan Hospital, the last functioning hospital in North Gaza, reflects the patterns of attacks documented in the report. Some staff and patients were forced from the hospital, while others, including the general director, were detained, with many reports of torture and ill treatment. The Israeli military announced the next day that its months-long operation in North Gaza was concluded with the separation of North Gaza from Gaza City. We are now seeing reports that parts of North Gaza are almost completely emptied of Palestinians. We have repeatedly warned that Israel's military operations in North Gaza place the entire Palestinian population of the governorate at risk through death and displacement. For months, we reported intense bombardment on residential buildings, shelters, and medical facilities, displacement orders, the prevention of the entry of aid, attacks on Palestinians trying to flee, and on their shelters once they reached Middle Gaza. Across Gaza, Israeli military operations in and around hospitals and associated combat have had a terrible impact precisely at a time of massive demands on healthcare due to the ongoing conflict. They have been particularly devastating for certain Palestinian civilians. 6 babies have reportedly died of hypothermia in the past few days alone. Women, especially those who are pregnant, have suffered gravely. Many women have given birth with little or no support, increasing risks to both mother and child. My office has been told that newborns have died as a direct result of this lack of care. According to the Ministry of Health of the State of Palestine, more than 100,000 Palestinians have been injured in Gaza. Many of these wounded people have died while awaiting treatment because of lack of access to healthcare. All this is occurring against the backdrop of increased obstacles placed before the United Nations and other humanitarian agencies in bringing aid, including urgent medical supplies into Gaza and distributing them across the territory.
Paul Givan, ex-First Minister, remember he only lasted about 8 months, is a man who never fails to land in the shite. Now, having failed as First Minister, he's now failing as Education Minister, a fact exemplified by his decision to go on a solo run, ignoring the advice of his officials by denying Bangor Academy, right, Northern Ireland's largest school with over 1,800 pupils, and Rathmore Primary, also in Bangor, well, he denied them the right to become integrated. This flies in the face of not only the wishes of the majority of parents in those schools, but also a new law which was passed by the Assembly in 2020, which requires the Department of Education to give more support to integrated education, not less. Now, Minister Givan explained his decision to refuse the request as being due to his belief that not enough evidence existed that there would be enough Catholic pupils at each of the schools for them to provide integrated education. This exemplifies and encapsulates Givan's sectarian mindset, as integrated education isn't confined to a Protestant or Catholic head count. Indeed, the 2022 legislation defined integrated schools as those which intentionally support, protect and advance an ethos of diversity, respect and understanding between those of different cultures and religions, beliefs and none. Now, while the majority of Bangor Academy's pupils are Protestant, 40% come from Catholic or non-Christian or non-religious backgrounds, with over 23 home languages spoken by its pupils, making it the embodiment of what was envisaged as an integrated school. Its principal, he said that his school community was extremely disappointed by the minister's decision, adding that Givan had gone against the wishes of the 80% of parents and guardians who'd voted in favour of integration. Can you imagine a politician here getting 80% of the vote and then them saying, no, you can't get elected? Some chance. This decision will no doubt be challenged both in the Assembly and maybe, who knows, maybe the courts. For if Paul Givan and his ilk have their way, believe me, we could once again end up with swings and playgrounds being chained up on Sundays. A review published by officials at Stormont into the case of convicted sex offender Michael McMonigal proved embarrassing reading for Sinn Féin. It discovered that he had claimed to have worked 80 hours per week over a 3-month period, which is now suggested to have been a misuse of public money. McMonigal had worked as a Sinn Féin press officer whilst also being employed by Michelle O'Neill and another Sinn Féin MP, Orla Begley. Now, the report acknowledged that it would have been unlikely that either the First Minister or Ms Begley would have been aware of his employment contracts or indeed his intention to deceive. What is clear is yet again the proper checks on the use of public monies at the Assembly have been found wanting. And while the DUP have attempted to capitalise on Sinn Féin's embarrassment over the McMonigal case, in May 2023, it was reported that their employment of relatives outnumbered counterparts from other parties by almost 2-1, with the 13 of their MLAs having a family member on the payroll in roles with no fewer than 11 different job titles. What is this? So I suggest people in glass houses, you know what I mean, etc., etc., etc. What is needed is a complete end to the nepotistic tendencies of some of our elected representatives, who seem to view their election as a quick way to cash in by keeping all available monies, public money, in their families. I doubt, however, that the turkeys will vote for Christmas. For remember, these are the same people who voted for a 10% increase in Stormont planning, running costs and higher pay for themselves. And this occurred only a matter of months after they had returned to the Assembly following one of their extended breaks while on full pay. That speaks volumes to their self-serving priorities. Time to clean it up, folks. Time to have real accounting and accountability and an end to the snouts in the trough up at the Assembly, because that money could be spent elsewhere. Recently defeated Westminster candidate Ian Paisley Jr. isn't letting his enforced unemployment get in the way of his ambition to set a record for collecting the most frequent flyer points. Having tagged along with his dad on a trip to New York, Ian managed to squeeze in on a meeting between Papa Doc and Donald Trump, way back in 2002. Ian Jr. made such a connection with the future president, He and Paul Givan even managed to get themselves confused for waiters at a later event. Well, Ian has somehow managed to wangle an invite to the Trump inauguration where he'll no doubt continue his embarrassing habit of behaving like a fanboy and demanding pictures with people who have no idea who he is. Like as if poor Melania doesn't have enough troubles, but here she has to deal with an idiot salivating. Where Ian goes from here is anyone's guess. Now, considering his love of travel at other people's expense, I'd suggest maybe he could consider setting up a travel agency. He could call it Paisley Tours, the company that gets you where you want to go, be that 1690 or 1921. Catchy, definitely catchy. Paisley Tours. You pay, we go. I could catch on, you know. What could catch on?
Oh, no, there was no need for it, like, there's no need for it, there was no need for it, like, that's bang out the order,